Do you want to know what the avoidance secret weapon is? Keep watching. If an avoidant person suddenly becomes extremely busy every time your relationship starts getting emotionally close, don't automatically assume they just have a busy life. They might be using something called the activation strategies. And once you understand this, you will start seeing this behavior completely different. Because avoidance doesn't always look like rejection. Sometimes it looks like, sorry, I have to go. I have basketball. I have to see my parents. I have work. I have school. I have made plans with my friends. I need to go for a run. And individually, none of these things are necessarily a problem. The problem is the pattern, because an avoidant person can use almost anything they have available to interrupt emotional intimacy. If you're new to this channel, I'm Marianna Turov. I'm a neuroscientist and a researcher and an anxious attachment clinical specialist. And I'm also the founder of NeuroIdentity, a neuroscience method I have developed based on my research on over 10,000 anxious attached people since the year 2017. In this training, you will go from anxious attachment to secure attachment at the identity level. Imagine navigating relationships with calm, safety, and ease. If you want to watch my NeuroIdentity Masterclass, go to the description box. I'll leave you the link right there. And also, don't forget to subscribe, give me a like, and leave me a comment. I read everyone. So, how did I learn this pattern of avoidance? Our friends, the avoidance, right? I learned this in a very personal level with my ex, Brian, who was a textbook avoidant. Brian always had something to do. Basketball, volleyball, going down to the beach, going for a run, seeing his parents, seeing his friends. There was always somewhere to go, someone to see, or something to accomplish. And here's what I eventually understood. It wasn't necessarily that Brian didn't want to spend time with me. It was that emotional closeness activated something inside of him that made distance feel safer for him. So the activity became the escape hatch. And this is what the activation strategies do. They interrupt connection. But here's where it gets much more interesting. There are actually two directions of deactivation. There's the external one and there's the internal one. Let's start with the external. External deactivation. This is what you can actually see. You get close to someone, you start having a vulnerable conversation, you want to talk about the relationship, you ask them how they're feeling, you want reassurance. Let's say you want to resolve something, and suddenly they need to work, play, gym, card game, just plans. They suddenly remember something they need to do, or they become completely absorbed in some activity. Again, none of these activities are inherently bad. The clue is when they appear. If every time intimacy and closeness increases, their availability decreases. Pay attention, because the activity itself may not be the problem. The activity may be functioning as a deactivation strategy. This deactivation strategy is creating enough distance that the emotional intensity can come back down. And then the avoidant person feels comfortable again. But there's another side to this that most people don't talk about: internal deactivation. After all my years of research, I consider this the silent, most dangerous one, because this is the part you can't see. The avoidant person doesn't only deactivate their connection with you, they can also deactivate their connection with themselves. And this is incredibly important, because what happens after they hurt you? What happens after they pull away? What happens after they ghost? What happens after they say something cruel or mean? What happens after they sabotage the relationship? A person who is emotionally connected to themselves has to eventually sit with what they did. They have to feel guilt. They have to experience remorse. They have to reflect. And they have to ask, why did I do that? Why did I contribute this? What did I learn? What should I do differently next time? Doing that is very uncomfortable. So instead of processing this, they deactivate. They go back to work, they exercise, they socialize, they date someone else, they focus on their kids, they start a new project, they scroll, they stay busy. They fill every available space with stimulation. And now they don't have to sit alone with themselves long enough to process what happened. That's internal deactivation strategies. And this is why some avoidant people can repeat the same exact relationship pattern for years. It's not necessarily because they don't know that something went wrong. It's because they don't stay emotionally connected to themselves long enough to learn from it. Think about that. You cannot learn a lesson you refuse to emotionally experience. And if every uncomfortable emotion gets interrupted, that's not reflection. And without reflection, there's no integration. You cannot change. And without integration and change, the same pattern can repeat over and over again. This is why I want you to stop thinking about avoidance as simply they don't love me. Sometimes the more useful question is, what happens inside this person when intimacy gets too close? Because maybe they're not just running away from you. They're running away from the emotional experience that comes with being close to you. And that emotional experience might include vulnerability, need, dependence, guilt, shame, responsibility, and fear. Or even the possibility that they might actually have to change. And that's why deactivation can be so powerful. It doesn't just remove you from the picture, it removes the emotional material that could force them to grow. Now, if you're anxiously attached, here's where I want you to be careful. Because when you see your partner constantly doing this, your instinct may be to fight the activity. Why are you always going to basketball? Why you always need to see your friends? Why can you stay home with me? Why are you always working? And you may think, if I can just get them to stop doing that activity, we'll finally connect. But that's not necessarily the solution. Because if you remove basketball, they might find work. Remove work, they'll find friends. Remove friends, they might find the gym. Remove the gym, they might find something else. You are fighting the strategy instead of understanding the function. The real issue isn't basketball. The real issue is what basketball is helping them avoid. That's why you can't love someone out of avoidance. You can't convince them to become emotionally available by becoming more available yourself. You can't chase them into self-reflection. You just can't. And you certainly cannot do their emotional processing for them. The change has to happen inside of them. They have to become willing to stay in the conversation, stay in the discomfort, stay with the guilt, stay with the vulnerability, stay with themselves. But the activation strategies will never allow them to do that. That's why if you're anxious attached, and if you're with an avoidant, the mission of that avoidant is not for you to learn to be more independent. The mission of that avoidant in your life is to help you learn how to let go. Because of these deactivation strategies, especially the ones that are internal, I consider as a professional that avoidance cannot change. Even if you hate me as I say this. If you're on your way to secure attachment, you don't ask. A secure person doesn't think, I don't run away from you. A secure person thinks, I don't run away from myself when something inside becomes uncomfortable. And that's the part you want to remember. Next time your avoidant partner suddenly becomes incredibly busy, when you try to connect, don't immediately ask, how do I get them to choose me? Instead, observe the pattern. What happens before they deactivate? What emotion are they avoiding? What conversation are they escaping? What responsibility are they not processing? And what happens after they create distance? Because once you understand the activation strategies, you stop chasing every excuse and you start seeing the real pattern and the real system underneath their behavior. I know if you're anxious attached, living with an avoidant or having a relationship with an avoidant can be really frustrating. But when you start seeing this system underneath the behavior, that doesn't mean that you'll stop complaining. You will understand and you'll have more knowledge that will lower your anxiety. And that changes everything. You don't need to have more knowledge about them. And one thing, having more knowledge about them doesn't mean that all of this is an excuse to integrate them. You don't have to stay in a relationship if you're not happy. If any of this information resonates with you, you can download my guide, The Anxious Attachment Healing Map, and I'll leave you the link right below in the description box. And I have a gift for you. After you join my newsletter on my website, I want to give you 15 minutes in private with me. Yes, you and me. It's not a sales call. It's just you and I talking about what's bothering you the most in this anxious attachment experience. It's just you and me talking and planning. And if you have any questions, come to my YouTube lives on my podcast, Healing Your Anxious Attachment with Marianna Turov, every Sunday at 2 p.m. New York Eastern Time. I hope this video served you, and I'll see you on the next one.